Hello and welcome. I am Jerrel. I'm a normal human being, and I make commercial video games for a living. I also make homebrew games for fun. It's just a cool way to hang out with you guys. So today we'll be taking a look at the latest trailer that dropped for Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, and I almost said Sparkling Coke Zero again. So I'll be taking a look at this video from a technical standpoint as a professional game developer. I'll be pointing out some things I find interesting, and I'll also be explaining how this looks significantly better than earlier trailers that were shown to us. So one thing I pointed out in that older video I did was clothes were not physics simulated, which is a problem. And people were saying that I was nitpicking, but the problem is that physics simulated clothing is a huge part of modern animation and games. And if a game is like this, is lacking physics simulation on the clothes, it means that the animators and the art director are not competent enough to do that. It is not difficult to animate or to set clothes up for physics simulations. And so if it is missing, it means that there is no competence or there is no care. And either of those would be very bad. So something I want to point out here is this very subtle physics animation on the clothes is very nice. It's excellent to see. It's subtle. It's not overdoing it. And these are the kind of details that show that the animators that are working on this are not just competent, but there is a degree of mastery over their animation. So it looks cool when his hair sort of waves in the wind a little bit along with his posing. Something I find interesting, I feel like the clothes are actually animated through bones, which means that they actually have bones inside the clothes in terms of a programmatic sense, that there's a rig inside and they animate the bones, or they have the bones simulate physics as opposed to using cloth simulation. So there's two different methods to simulate physics when it comes to clothes. You can either rig them with bones. Same goes with hair. You can either rig them with bones or use some sort of cloth simulation or fabric simulation. I have seen some instances where I believe that this game is using bone, which is interesting because that's more time consuming to set up, and it's more work than just using cloth simulation. So I just wanted to point out, this is one of my favorite characters, Trunks Word. Well, I mean, in Saiyans, you know, Goku Low is my favorite, but Trunks Word is my favorite Saiyan, of course. What I really like on the Frieza here is the visual expression they have on the metal, is they didn't overdo it. They could have used a physically based shader, which is hyper realistic, and it has all these realistic reflections. This is a more reserved way to express metal, and it is more coherent as a visual aesthetic, and it really matches nicely with the rest of his character. So I really appreciate that they didn't go overboard with the shading on that. So I think it looks very good. It shows that there is some restraint and a understanding of visual design here. This is something that is interesting, and I'd like to point out a couple more points, but something I noticed on this is really neat, and it's so subtle. I didn't notice it in my other videos, but this time I am noticing it. So I'm not sure if this is something that's just recent, but this is something that was absolutely not present in the older trailer videos, especially for the Namek Saga, which was just awful. The graphics on that were just tragic and terrible. There was no sign of competence in any of that. So something I noticed here is that the lighting for the face does not follow the same rules as the rest of the body. And the reason being is that it allows the lighting and the shading on the face to look good and to convey the shape of the character well. You can see, for example, the light source for the face is somewhere down here at the bottom, but then if you look at his body over here, the light source is coming from behind. If the head were to follow the same rules and light sources, then the face would actually be in shadow, and this part would be highlighted. So this is an excellent sign that there has been significant consideration artistically into what's going on here. So I'm very happy to see this. It's interesting lighting. You can see the shadows under the eyes here make him look menacing with the light shining upwards. I will point this out in a couple other places as well, because it's excellent. This is such a great attention to detail that's very easy to miss. At 23 seconds here, I really appreciate the way the camera whip pans. The camera is not cutting. This is just very good camera direction. Whoever was in charge of directing the camera movements and whatnot has a strong background in some sort of cinematography. Why do I have a hard time saying that? They have a background in cinematography, and the way that the camera is seamless and it swoops around the pans and it stops in just the right places for the impact frames, very well done. So that's excellent. It's also not too disorienting as well. At 25 here, 25 seconds, I really like the attention to detail on the face, and there's something that I will point out with the eyes a little bit later on as well. That I like the hand-drawn wrinkles under the eyes, but also on the brow here, you see just one. It adds that little bit of intensity. This kind of attention to detail, the variable line width, this is so hugely improved from the earlier trailers that we saw, and this is why I say it doesn't even look like the same game. This is excellent attention to detail, excellent expression of art here. Very well done. Very strong artistic understanding that we're seeing here. At 31 seconds, I really like this I pose. It's not a T pose. I would call it an I pose because that's straight up just the letter I. Really dominating, just letting your foes know you don't even need to go for the T pose. He's just going for the I pose. So I love that. I'd like that to be my background, actually. The impact particle effects on Goku getting hit here are really cool. I just want to go over that again. It looks similar to how in the show when a character gets hit so hard they spit, like spit flies out of their mouth. That's what it looks like. Very cool little particle effect there, so I really like that. At 44 seconds, I really like the sort of battle damage that you see on 18's clothes, and especially on Vegeta as well. Just very, very cool to see that. I really do like that. And at 55 seconds, I mean, all of this looks so cool. But at 55, we get a very good example of this great expression, this great posing on the facial expressions. You have the thicker lines around the eyes. You have these sweat drops. You know, it's not just a graphic. His mouth, the model is actually animated to open, and it's so expressive. You see the brows are contorted in this sense of horror. I would assume they used blend shapes for these, and that way they can have a great, excellent, full control over how the characters look in terms of the posing for the faces. This is so expressive and excellent. And now what I want to point out here, if you have a look, the eye actually sticks out from the face, which means the eyes actually have their own geometry. The eyes are not a texture that is part of the face. And why this is so excellent is that it allows the characters to have a perspective that looks more correct, that looks closer to the actual anime. If they did not do this, then the eye would sort of be bending around the face and it just wouldn't look right. And despite the fact that it is sticking out a little bit and it's a little, you know, in this particular shot, it doesn't look absolutely perfect. It looks way better than if it was a texture on the face. So I really appreciate the attention to detail there. I really appreciate the solution that they've used here for that. That's just such a cool solution. I think it's quite easy. I don't believe that they are breaking the character's geometry as they do in Fighter Z. This is a solution that would take less time. And it's an elegant solution. I quite like that solution. Very good. So nicely done on that. At 116,
greater than before.
I'd like to have a look.
Would you like me to show you? You won't
at
get away.
The way that Tien's clothes just ripple. So you see another example of physics simulation. And again, something like this does not take a huge amount of time to set up. It's not very difficult to set up. And so I'm glad to see that the development team has indeed implemented these, because this was totally absent in earlier trailers that we've seen. And it's such a small detail, but it's something that adds a huge amount. It just looks like a PS2 game when you don't have that. I really appreciate that. That's really cool. Oh, hey guys, you got a minute? It's me, Jerrel. I'm the normal human being and I develop video games. I just want to tell you about the game that I made really quick. So in my last video, I was wearing the Dragon Ball headband, and then people in the comment section got super mad at me. I don't even know what they were talking about. They said it was the wrong anime, but guys, I'm a big Dragon Ball fan. And so this time I thought Hollow Arc, when Hollows come to Earth, and then Gohan gets the Hollow Mask.
So I thought it would be cool if I wore the Dragon Ball Hollow mask. And then the hat that Roshi gives Gohan before Roshi dies. But then Gohan's like, oh, I'll wish you back to life and I'll return the hat to you one day. So anyway, pretty recently I launched a new game on the Nintendo Switch. It's an action puzzle game. It's on the Switch, but it is coming to Steam and the Atari VCS as well. And if you have a PS Vita, I actually made a free version for the PS Vita via Homebrew. I've got a couple other free Homebrew games that you can play, so if you want to grab those, I'll put the link to my itch.io. Okay.
I don't know. Something about Goku's face just doesn't seem right here. I'm not exactly sure what it is. Perhaps his facial features are not proportioned right, but something feels a little off. I can't quite. So I really like the physics simulation. Again, it's not a huge amount, but it's just enough to sell. Like you see his shirt rippling right there where he's building up power. It's not a huge amount, but it's just enough to have that visual flair, to really sell visually that these characters are generating so much power. They do it so well with so little. Like they don't go over the top with it. At 153, I want to point out something I noticed that I really like is just the height fog that you have on the mountains here helps the landscape stand out in an interesting way. It doesn't just blur into like this shapeless, detailless blob form like you see in the Hunter x Hunter Nen Impact game. And if you have a look at the color dynamic here between the environment and the characters, you see the characters don't get messy, they don't blend into the background, they stand out in a positive way. And that's because this displays a very good amount of visual understanding that they could have made these backgrounds more vibrant. You'll see that from people who are early on in their game development careers. They'll make the backgrounds just vibrant and punchy and, oh, the colors, Duke, the colors. But then that makes it just a visual mess. And this shows me that the artists here really understand how to keep things clear in terms of visually communicating what is important. And the characters are able to stand out from the environment in a good way. This is one of the scenes where the environments blend well with the characters. There are other scenes like what we see in the cities that do not blend well with characters at all. It's just overly detailed in terms of the shader style. But in these outdoor areas, it looks quite good. So at 2:08, I pointed, J.J. Abrams directed this angle. I got that from an inside source. You can tell from the lens flare here. I pointed this out, but I'll point it out again in one of my last video, how it's not simple to do aura effects like that, where it has these bright colored lines emanating, and they are just staying along the outside. They're emanating out from the character. It's actually way more complicated than it seems to do that. So I have a little bit of I'm a little bit jelly, and I have respect for the whoever programmed and created those effects, because it's not that simple, and it's really way more complicated than you think. So well done. It looks fantastic. I really like that. People in like comments in my last video mentioned passive auras are missing, and I don't understand why the characters don't have passive auras, but I do understand now, like, you know, that like here, like why doesn't Gohan have an aura? I understand what you're saying. I don't really know. I'm not sure. We see the camera clip underneath the stage a little bit, and again, that's going to happen in games like this where the camera is so frenetic and it's moving so much and it's trying to keep track of all the action. In this particular situation, the camera is not being overridden by a different control system. There are multiple control systems at work. There's a dynamic control system which allows the camera to be controlled in this way where it's moving around dynamically, and then it will swap over and it'll switch over to directed movements, sort of when characters are doing special attacks, so it can seamlessly flow. So I don't understand why the camera would drop underneath. In general, as developers, we use a sphere cast. So we sort of cast out a sphere and we see if the sphere is interacting with a terrain, and we can control the camera dynamically. So I'm not exactly sure why it's gone underneath here. There isn't really a reason, because there's not much going on in this scene. So I hope that they address things like that, because it's kind of distracting in a game like this. It's very immersion breaking when it goes under the terrain. So hopefully they address that. It's just a little oversight, but that's not a, you know, It's not game-breaking, really. I mean, it is if it's Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and people are just really unhappy with it. So this is a scene, if you're not familiar with Dragon Ball, but I know, everything about it. So if you're not familiar with this and you're new to Dragon Ball, this is what happens. Cell, he used an ability to eat all the humans on Earth in one go. So this, you know the line, "I'm hungry, Cell hungry," and then he eats all the humans, and so Goku, the only way to stop Cell is for Goku to tickle Cell, and because Cell's so fat, he can't stop Goku. So Goku says, "I'm gonna tickle him now." Okay, and then Gohan's like, "No, Daddy, no." And then he does tickle Cell, and then all the humans come out. But I mean, like, real Dragon Ball fans know that. So at 233, I actually really like we saw it on Piccolo, but just the fine details, like the sweat on Cell's face, and he has this look of horror. Excellent posing and great attention to detail. I really like that. Let's see here. At 255, I really like the camera direction, so I'll just go ahead and delete it. 255. This is all one seamless shot where the camera sweeps around. That's such a cool rotational sweep. It really sells that sense of power, and then it zooms in, or it dollies in to Cell's face. So it starts where he's generating the power in his Kamehameha. Starts there, whips around, looks at the Kamehameha and charging it up, and then dollies into his face. Really great camera direction, so I'm super looking forward to this. It really sells that sense of power and excitement. Very well done. And then at 310, just that little bit of physics simulation on Gohan's clothes rippling as it shows that they're torn, and there's this theme struggle, and you see his shirt waving in the wind. And again, this is something that was not seen in earlier trailers, and it was something that people got mad at me, said I was nitpicking, but it turns out that the developers thought that it was important enough to address that. So they already knew that their game needed simulation for that. And then lastly, there's just one funny thing that I wanted to point out. This is the last detail I've noticed here. This is just a weird detail. I don't know what the deal is here. So obviously great line work, hand drawn. But what's so weird is Goku doesn't have the line art on his face. This is the only time I've seen this. I've seen quite a bit of footage of this game at this point. And that's normal. Every other character's face has the line art. And then for some reason, Goku doesn't have any line art at all on his face. So I don't know what the deal is. Seems like an oversight from the developers, which shows that there is, a degree of manual control when it comes to that. So I think I missed a couple points where I also pointed out where characters had different lighting on their faces. I'll just double check that really quick. All right, and one last one. This is an excellent example of something I noticed where the lighting on the faces sometimes, I mentioned it earlier, sometimes they don't adhere to the same light sources as everything else. You can see here with Gohan, his body, the light sources are coming from the left here, and there's quite harsh shadows. And if his head was following, or if was following the same light sources and rules, then this half of his face would be totally dark, and it wouldn't look right because that's not necessarily how they would depict that visually in the anime. So what they've done is they're manually using a different light source for the face here, and that allows the important elements of his face to be well lit, and it's an excellent solution, and it's a great artistic decision. Otherwise it would just look like a pretty, janky PS2 game, but this shows that they have significantly more understanding of artistic design and visual expression, and this kind of thing I pointed out in my earlier videos, which was largely negative about the game, because they did not show this level of understanding in terms of art. They didn't understand lighting on the face and in the body. And in this video, it shows that they do. So I'm not sure if they've adjusted their development team, if they'd added more artists to the team, but I'm so glad to see this. So that's all I've got time for today. I hope you enjoyed watching that video. And thanks very much for watching. Again, I make commercial games and also homebrew games. If you want to check out my commercial games, I do have some on the Nintendo eShop. My latest ones you'll see on the screen just there. And also I'll put the link to my itch.io if you want to play some of my homebrew games. Come hang out with me on live streams. My last one, I had a lot of fun. We were just hanging out and chatting with people, and we were throwing out ideas. So I'm working on a Dragon Ball Z homebrew game actually at the moment, and it's going to be a crossover with my latest game, Clash Your Ball. So hope you're looking forward to that. That homebrew game will be free. It'll be on the Vita and on the PC. Anyway, take care of yourselves, everyone. Be well.